Free trials for AI products don't work. So what do you do instead?
We have a lot of upfront cost for us, the ACV needs to be higher because we spend so much more time with customers just to bring the data. And, we do the job to kind of create a library of recipes so that you can, as much as you can, plug and play. But yeah, there is some work to assist you building the right space, putting them in place and building the habit with your team.
That's Chris, CEO at Slite. He shares why they couldn't run free trials and what they did instead.
So I'm very much back into startup mode. We are spending as much time because it let us learn as well. So it's not just for the customer, it's also for us, which is maybe an interesting thing. And I actually have my sales team that does the same.
Before we jump into the show, today's episode is brought to you by Fullcast, the only AI-powered platform that streamlines your entire sales cycle from plan to pay. Customers report up to 80% cost savings, 20% growth in pipeline, and 30% boost in RevOps efficiency. With modules like territory and quota management, routing, and capacity planning, Fullcast adapts to your unique needs, whether you need one solution or an all-in-one platform. Visit fullcast.com, book a demo, and mention the Revenue Formula podcast to unlock an exclusive premium gift just for listeners. And now, enjoy the show.
So, Chris, do you enjoy watching handball or not really?
Watching what?
Handball.
Yeah. No, that was correct answer. Watching what?
Handball.
Yeah.
Okay. Not that much. No. Okay. In Olympic Games, maybe I watched a couple of them, but that's it.
It's validated. No, we were talking earlier today. Denmark, world champions now, but it's
really?
Who cares? Yeah, exactly. Who cares about this sport? Is it just Denmark? Probably, and maybe Norway a little bit also.
France actually, historically was super good in handball, and I think Croatia.
Croatia.
I think that's the kind of the best. They are supposed to be the historical best, right? Yeah.
But it was just funny because we talked about, Denmark has now won 4 times in a row, World Championship. And I remember, I think it must have been last time we lost. I was in France, in Tignes, skiing.
Yeah.
And we lost to France in the final. So that was really painful, especially because then you get teased by folks just don't care about it at all.
Yeah.
Beating you. And that's ultimate level of defeat, I gotta say.
Yeah, I can imagine it.
But it's good. We have another parent on the show today. So I guess we have plenty of subjects we can dabble into if we want to.
Are you both parents?
Yeah. We're actually talking about the show always about our kids for some reasons. Always at the intro we talk about last night, this and this. But instead of talking about kids and handball, Mikkel, what did we want to talk about today?
We wanted to, that's a crazy segue, by the way. We wanted to talk about basically how AI is changing selling and kind of the requirements necessary to actually really start selling AI. And with us, we have Chris from Slite. Thanks so much for joining. You had a pretty great post on this exact subject, sharing your experience selling AI for some time. And I just wanted to start off by asking you, hey, why is it we cannot have trials anymore with AI? That was kind of the main concept of your post.
Well, I think because AI doesn't work yet. I guess if I am trying to be a bit optimistic, that's probably the reason. If you look at the potential change of AI right now for knowledge workers, it will be massive. Everybody knows that. And I'm a developer and I see that in the developer community, it changed the work already. But for all the rest of functions, sales, support, success, marketing, most people still use AI to just, translate or, correct their documents in Claude and ChatGPT. And the rest is just marketing promises and so on, but you don't see them applied at work. And so, I just think that right now we are still in the kind of building phase, and it's a very, very strange phenomenon in the industry where you have all the customers that are already convinced it will change their work. And so they are willing to invest, but at the same time, none of them actually have impact, and it's actually not working. So it's a very, very strange kind of time. And for these years to come, we'll have, I think, trials where people are at the same time building their use case, selling them internally, making a case for what they are already starting to pay being worth it and so on.
Very cool. Maybe to kind of give folks a little bit of context of where you're coming from and where also your perspective is coming from. Can you give us a little bit of a kind of a glimpse into Slite and the new company you're building, kind of for folks to have that context?
Yeah, so I've started Slite. So Slite is a documentation platform for teams, like it's a knowledge base. We built it since 2017. And the idea of Slite is very simple. It's like a knowledge base that is extremely simple to use for all your teams. So typically for teams of hundreds, 1,000 people, it's something that is a big problem, that the documentation is extremely complicated to use. And at the same time, very powerful for the administrator. So that's a business that, keeps running. We have like thousands of customers from, actually very small team of 2 or 10 people to up to 3,000 wide companies. And in 2023, like when AI basically kind of rised, we were the first to release a feature called Ask, which is basically an AI search on your private company data, your knowledge base. It worked very well. It had a lot of limitation, and over the years we saw that people wanted more from it, and that their knowledge was not just in slides. They had their Slack, their HubSpot, their Salesforce, or whatever old important data. And so we decided to build a new product called Super, which makes AI ready to use at work. And the way we do it is we simply sync the data from all your company sources. It's very much plug and play, like you can do it instantly. And then we give you and your team recipes and tools to get instant value. So we let them ask in bulk. We give them the best AI search out of the box. We let them build automation and so on in a very kind of easy to use interface.
And just listening to this, right, and kind of getting some of that context is there immediately is this, hey, is it going to work for me? Is it going to work for us as a business, right? Because I think this is a little bit where the rift is starting to show now for the traditional SaaS playbook and SaaS sales motion, whether or not that's, sales-led or inbound-led or whatever you want to go for. It's usually like, hey, look at this thing. Hey, you can press those buttons and it's going to do this other thing, right? Kind of that's usually kind of the way, all of that, the SaaS playbook basically has worked throughout many different iterations and longer and shorter and what have you. I think what's now happening on the AI side is, well, okay, you're kind of pressing this button with your data, but what will it say when I press that button with my data?
Yeah.
Is basically that, is that the change? Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on the fact that data is a massive factor. Like not every company has the same kind of policy around keeping their CRM clean, for instance, or, using the same status in their CRM. Not every company has the same documentation and async written culture. So maybe your information is locked in meetings and you actually need, before anything else, to have like your meeting recorder transcript being synced with such a tool, for instance. So you're right, like the collection of private data is one of the biggest kind of like blocker for AI at work. The thing that we see is that there are some tools, like typically if you have Slack, if you have your HubSpot, if you have GitHub, Linear, whatever, like some tools can bring instant value immediately. So for instance, we have this feature that is built in Super that analyzes your Slack conversation from the last week and give you a digest of the top information. And that has proven to be like one of the killer features of Super so far, where people, like even without specific instruction, like it literally just like list the top 3 topics and give you a summary. It already delivers value. But then yes, like if you want to kind of have like a better application and, solve more specific problems of your work, you need to adapt. You need work in prompt engineering. You need work in terms of automation, plugging it to the right tool. And yeah, like it basically, you need to rethink your whole pipeline of tools and instruction and so on. And that's what we try to make it easy.
I kind of also want to take a step back here. One thing that's also probably great for the listener to hear and understand is, so who are you actually selling this to and how are you selling it at the moment? I think it would be really good to hear as well.
So what happens most of the time right now is, and that's actually interesting, like I think the biggest use case is for customer facing teams. So, support, customer success, sales, and, revenue operations. But very often, like the persona that is appointed to work on this topic will be product, IT, CTO, like technical folks, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense, but, like that's just the way it is. Like, people affiliate AI to technology, and so they put like their technology specialist leading this. The thing that is useful with this is that these people usually are in charge of tooling. And once again, the biggest hurdle to deploy AI at work is access to data. So typically, if you have like a CRM and you need information from your CRM, you will need engineers to pipe it correctly, you know, to whatever tool will use AI to generate value from you. So yeah, for now, like we still have the entry point being the technology person. And then like, you know, when we build recipes and, you know, agents, so more kind of like specific assistance for certain use case would be with the, you know, whoever like the team lead on this topic. So revenue operation, customer specialist, this kind of thing.
When it comes to selling this, let's dive a little bit deeper. Why is it we can't just have a regular approach of freemium and free trials? What is it that starts breaking there? What are some of the learnings you've made in this process of selling your AI offering?
Slite originally is a freemium product. So it's literally self-serve. You can start, create your workspace, you know, bring your data, start kind of building your knowledge base, and at some point like upgrade and, you know, bring the rest of your team and so on. And then we have a sales-led approach for enterprise where we help them bring their data, structure them, and so on. The thing with this is that you pretty much know what you are paying for. Like you arrive, you have a knowledge-based system. We have some features that are dedicated to knowledge management, like verification, reminders, Ask, which is our AI search that comes built in, the way to see like what are the gaps and so on. So it's very much like, of course it's advanced, but it's very much expected, you know, what you get out of it. For AI at work, it's very, very different. You need to have the right data source plugged in. Like most of the problem that we have with people not finding the right information with Super, it's just linked to the fact that you have not linked the right data source or that your data source is not well used. So typically people dropping like massive documents unstructured, it's very hard for AI to make sense of it, as an example. So that's, I think, like one of the biggest reasons to, you know, like change the mechanism. We need to have we have a lot of upfront cost for us, like, you know, like the ACV needs to be higher because we spend so much more time with customers just to bring the data. And then the second thing is on building the assistant. You know, like it's great to have the thing that is nice with Super is that out of the box, you will be able to ask any question about, you know, whatever you have synced. So, you know, your customers, your pipeline, but also, you know, your documentation, how to SOPs, and also stuff that you wouldn't expect to ask. Like, you know, from Slack, you have so much information from, you know, like a case, like a support team that is speaking about how to do X. It has never been documented, never since. And you actually ask the question and you find the information from a 9-month-old thread. And that's the beauty of like this product, I think. Like built, like out of the box, it will kind of give you that. Same thing out of the box, we give you security form. So we have a bulk mode where you can literally fill forms in instant. And that's the kind of thing that we give you out of the box. But if you want like, and you need, you know, like more specific use case for your team, like you want to have like, you know, like given this this customer question, I want you to generate a draft of email to reply with like, you know, like an attempt to upsell them or something like this. You need to build specific assistants. It needs some work to kind of like have the right templates. And, you know, we do the job to kind of create a library of recipes so that you can, as much as you can, plug and play. But yeah, like there is some work to assist you building the right space, putting them in place and building the habit with your team.
And do you think this additional work and those additional proof points they need to show to the customer, do you think this is because maybe your company is still new on that part, or the product is still new, or AI as a technology is still new? Do you think that, you know, what of those do you think are the drivers? And, you know, I'm kind of asking for people listening to this, trying to you know, triangulate to their own approach. Is this maybe something that also translates to them, right? Is you know, if it is the technology, and I'm guessing it's probably part of the answer here, taking you know, jumping ahead here a little bit, you know, is this concern voiced by the customer? They're kind of like, hey, you know, I don't know if this thing is going to work for me, so therefore we need to do all of that, you know, work up front, right? Is that change in buying behavior, or selling behavior rather, is that driven by the buyer basically?
Yeah, 100%. Like the thing that is so interesting right now with almost all my leads is that they want AI at work. They have problems that they know could be solved in some way. But then, like, you know, it basically stopped there. It's kind of like, you know, we know that, you know, like it could automate stuff, but then kind of mapping out the exact use case that we could solve for them, like, is another kind of piece that they don't really kind of have yet. They are willing to invest in this, but they don't really exactly know why, or, you know, which kind of part of the whatever, like their workflow they want to replace. So you need to do like as much consulting work and, you know, like assistants building that for them and showing them what is possible, as you need to just, you know, like deploy the tool in their company.
And And kind of on top of that, right? So if someone trying to figure this out with you, and maybe there was a general directive from the CEO, we need to buy some AI tools now. And then, they basically kind of land with you. You have that conversation. Well, what should I buy a AI tool for? Do you then usually see that these guys need to kind of go back to their boss and boss's boss and show like, hey, and here it works, and this is how it's going to work out. And, do you think that that's part of the reason why they want to have this trial and kind of want to really go deep in this? Or, what other stuff is driving this behavior?
I think there is like just an intuition. The thing that is quite nice with this product is, and I mean products with an S, right? Like it can apply to other kind of type of tools, is when you give a demo, like we always give a demo on real data or kind of like previous companies, so Slite kind of documentation and so on. And you can see the aha moment almost instantly. Like literally you ask a question and people will be like, okay, like I see myself asking this question and I will probably have like made a meeting for this or, asked somebody on Slack and waited for 2 days and, lost a lot of time from my team. So people see the value instantly. They see the potential instantly. The problem is obviously like they wonder like, would it work with my data? Mm-hmm. So, like instantly they need to try, like they can't really kind of trust just like, what you show them. So I think that's like one of the biggest blocker. And to convince their boss, as you say, like they need like more kind of clear ROI. So they need like one use case that is very kind of painful for the team to be really well solved. So, like an example would be very recurring examples for us would be support asking questions on internal things, like, maybe they have Fiend or whatever kind of like a copilot of support, like when they work in their tool, in the Zendesk, Intercom or whatever. But then there is like at least 50% of the more complicated questions, which are the one that takes time, that they need, where they need internal documentation or internal chat and so on. And this is where we take place. And so once we manage to set up a Slack channel where they can mention super, it answer them, and they can, build this habit, already like we have like a massive use case where they know and they can see very clearly that they are winning a lot of time. And the same thing applies to, for instance, RFP. So, like you have like a solution engineer, a sales person that needs to kind of fill either like a sales form, security form, RFP. And they see the tool that is built for that, where they can just literally paste and you see like all the cells auto-completing with all the answers, and you can tailor like which filters to use to answer this, and you can drill down each individual question. And then they're like, okay, obviously this made my team win 2 hours or 3 hours or 5, it's days sometimes of their life. And yeah, that makes like one of the best use cases that they can sell to their boss. Like, the value is obvious, but they need to reach this point of like, okay, like this moment, like this is what I'm setting, like, like I'm removing like 50% of my time of my support agents looking for answers, and I'm removing like, like days of work of the solution engineers and sales that can just like, take more time closing deals instead of filling these forms.
I mean, it sounds like a lot of stuff actually happens in this whole almost like onboarding of the customers, right? You mentioned there's something around the data, connecting things, what recipes to use. How much time do you spend with the customers for them to even reach the point where like, themselves using it go, wow, now I kind of get it, right? How much time and effort is invested on your part?
Honestly, a lot. But it's also like, I don't think this is a lesson for the future. Like we really want to streamline this. But right now, like we are spending as much time as we can. Like we are very much in founder mode. Like it's a new product. It's like we are becoming a multi-product company. So I'm very much like back into startup mode where I'm just like, like myself and, my actually co-founder and so on. We are spending as much time because it let us learn as well. So it's not just for the customer, it's also for us, which is maybe like an interesting thing. And I actually have my sales team that does the same. They are, like giving us the voice of the customer. And honestly, like we needed to build the right kind of like features. Like it's such a change of habit. Like you need to build the right tools for the customers. You need to add the right source, to add them the right way as well. Because it's not just, like an API integration or whatever. You need to index the right data in the right format. Like if you have a CRM, how do you index the data? You have probably custom field in your Salesforce or your HubSpot. Like this is a lot of complexity to understand, and where you really need to work hand in hand with the customers. So yeah, like you spend, I think like, like in 30 minutes, we'll have your workspace set up and you will get instant value. You can ask anything. But then for your team to build the habit and for your team to see the specific use case, as I mentioned before, that really like deliver value and that justify the cost, for the whole company and so on, it would take like a couple of weeks.
So the other element of making this all work out, because this is a lot of cost as well, like the time you spend, right?
Yeah.
And I know one of your points was also that you want to run paid trials. So how do you get, first off, how do you even get customers to agree to that? But then also, how do you figure out what to charge here? Let's share some of the wisdom and insights you have with the audience who might consider that, dang, we probably need a bit more white glove service with this new AI offering, but we're not sure how we're going to justify the cost.
Yeah, it came very naturally. I think it's the right way to go for most teams out there. The simple answer is that customers are willing to do it. Like they see the potential, but they know that they need internal change. They need to build the habit internally. They need to evangelize on, whatever change of habits needs to happen. Because, let's face it, if you have like a support team, for instance, obviously like AI is going to just change their life. It just like can remove so much time like lost in discussions and so much time lost from your engineers as well, or product that are answering their technical questions. But between this kind of observation and them like starting to use a tool and, changing their habits and not going to a Slack channel to ask a question to their engineer and instead, asking like this tool, for instance, it takes like, there is a change of habits that is quite important. So the decision makers are very aware of this. And I think it only takes one good answer for them to realize the value. And then their whole question is basically how to deploy it, how to build the habit in my team and so on. I don't think it's that much about like justifying the cost to their superior, because we are like in SMBs. Most of the time we are with the decision makers already, or, close. The biggest challenge is rather security. Like you are talking about customer data. So that's a big, point of attention for people. But beside that, yeah, it's not about like the decision. It's more about like, showing that, okay, the tool can deliver the value, but now you need to kind of like change the whole company and, have the habit of the whole company around it.
So I'm actually wondering, what's your take actually? Do you think this extra scrutiny, let's just call it that extra carefulness basically that's being deployed there, is that because AI is new? Just like SaaS was new 20 years ago. It's like, we don't have this on-prem. We have it like somewhere in, it wasn't AWS back then. It was somewhere else. Or do you think it's just different because it's AI, right? Kind of, is it, what do you think is going to happen in the next 2, 3, 4 years while you guys and a couple of others are trailblazing right now? Will this get easier? Is this a transitional thing? How should people think about it in terms of what they need to adapt to now versus, what maybe is going to come in a couple of years from now?
I think the danger that some companies perceive is more like, some people perceive is more for almost their own job, which is fair, honestly. It's hard to kind of like change habits when, you have two things. Like, like some people are reluctant to change. And I think for good reason, it might very much change the way their team is composed at some point. The security part is obvious, and I don't think it will change over the years. There is if you touch like company data, like the big barrier of AI at work, and that's what we work on, that's the biggest first step, is access to private data. If you want access to private data, you need to sync it to have semantic search. I think that's doomed to be changing. And if anything, I believe there probably will be one actor that will emerge, more of a developer tool, that will offer you one RAG system, so one semantic search system, that then other tools will tap into. That's maybe an idea for a company, if entrepreneurs listen to it. I do think that there will be one actor doing this, just because it makes more sense to have a company that says, okay, we want one assistant for our CS doing X, and then we have one assistant for our product doing Y. But we don't want to have 10 dependencies where everybody is replicating the entirety of our company data and, you multiply the risk. So that's, I think, just a natural, I don't remember the name, the word that you use, but, natural kind of point of attention for teams. Yeah. But then for the rest, it's just that, as I said at the beginning, AI doesn't work out of the box for most of the team out there. So it's basically you have a wow effect very fast. The problem and you have a lot of UX problem around this, is, like making it like properly work. So I can give you example, like one thing that we do, for instance, one for the most basic use case of Super, you ask a question, like for instance, something like, what is our pricing, right? The most basic question. I mean, it's a bit weird to ask it, but why not? And then like, you realize that you have like 2 products, you have 3 pricing plans for each, plus a lot of custom data. Like, you have like 1 customer that you did a custom price for, and AI gets all this data. And, like literally it's very hard for it to answer. So it can very easily give like a wrong answer and be extremely confident saying, well, the price is X, and X being like the custom price that you did to the last customer, which is obviously incorrect. So if anything, this, like the technology works, but the experience for the customer like might not. So, we needed to build UX for this, where we explain and we let you refine and we let you filter and we let you build specific context for people asking this. Like if the customer support team asks that, it shouldn't tap into the custom contract, for instance, or this kind of thing. So yeah, you have like so many kind of challenges along the way that I think like teams realized both the potential and the fact that it doesn't work out of the box and they need to do a lot of upfront work.
But I also think kind of, you mentioned a couple of times now, kind of changing habits, right? And I think changing user behavior in general is really, really difficult. It's just really difficult to actually achieve that, right? And when you think about traditional SaaS, it's, sure, it's, a different system you need to log into, but it's kind of the thing that you want to get done stays the same. You're just using, a different colored hammer, at that point in time, right? But now with the AI jump, at least we're kind of all believing it's kind of a jump. Suddenly that changes, right? So I'm actually wondering, maybe it's not necessarily a technological shift that's driving the skepticism and the scrutiny. Maybe you kind of, what you kind of also seeing there is a lot of like, hey, dang, actually this is a different way of working. And getting that change into the organization by way of buying a product is just really difficult to pull off, right? Kind of, it's just really difficult to nail that. And it almost makes me wonder, is this maybe some of the driver here, right? Versus, sure, yes, we have a new technology, but actually trying to get this change in the organization to happen. Yeah. That's actually the real problem here.
100%. I think you're absolutely correct. And I think like, it goes even stronger than that. Like, as I said before, you know that there is a change that will happen. You can have like a glimpse at what the future will look like. And at the same time, the future is not there yet. So, whatever you use is not perfect for this use case. So it's kind of like, you need to kind of like build conviction on, like this will be possible in 2 years and we need to kind of prepare for that. Or, like in 6 months. And at the same time, like, you see all the problems along the way. Like you wish, I don't know, for instance, I'm a product person. I wish like a tool was able to prepare a report on product requests on a certain area of my product and to read all my product board or my cycle, whatever kind of like backlog, feature request or customer feedback platform I'm using. And the rate is that right now, AI is not built for this because it's unlimited context. So you can't really kind of like feed everything, right? You need to do like some work before, and the UX around this has not been cracked yet. So there are a lot of, there is a big gap between kind of like what is the future, and we all know it will be this, and like what the reality allows right now, and what the quality of the tools allow right now. So building the change of culture and the change of habit, given that you are not there yet, is obviously very difficult.
Yeah. And trying to kind of pull it back into the practical realm for some of the folks out there. Do we have like some very specific, hey, this is, we saw this problem, and I think this is so valuable here to have the founder here actually talking about this, because it's a multifaceted problem. It's not just a problem that the VP sales or something like this runs into. It's like, it's kind of all over the place, right? But how did you actually change your approach to acquiring new customer? And so specifically around the onboarding trial period, right? Kind of, you mentioned already kind of it's paid. What other things did you kind of do in order to try and, frame this thing and make it, make this motion work for you?
So I think like I'm thinking always like acquisition first, like marketing first. The thing that we see is that I don't believe that you would have a lot of tools tapping into your, like shared kind of data of information. So there is this kind of like paradox where we will sell vertical use cases, but at the end, like what will work will be one tool where your entire team, get value from. And so the way we approach things, and we are literally building like, like our marketing campaigns right now, but we do manual outreach for now, is like, as I said, like, vertical use cases. So, I mentioned like support, like internal documentation, internal Slack access with an AI search is just incredibly powerful. People usually need it either through Slack. So we have like a Slack bot that is for that. And we have like a Chrome extension that let them access when they are working on Zendesk or Intercom or whatever. And so we build like an acquisition campaign around this use case. Same thing for bulk, RFP. Like you have some specific persona that need it, that lose days of their work on this. And so, it's very easy to kind of like sell to them. And then when we are like with these people and, building the pilots, same thing, like we over focus on these two or, whatever, like this N use case that we've detected with them. We help them build the right prompt, the right kind of setup, the right tools. We make sure that it works for them and so on. And then, we'll speak about expanding to the rest of the team. But, like we spend a lot of time just making sure that this setup, these tools, these use cases are really, really well solved. And then we expand to the rest. And so like the way it works is very much like, like we have a trial of like, which is very much a setup time of 2 weeks where we just like, like have their tool synchronized. And then we kind of like set up like assistants with the right prompts and so on for them. We help them kind of set up like whatever integration if they need to. So in their Slack, in their Chrome and so on, we do office hours with their team. So, like all in all, this probably takes like 3 hours of our time and a lot of, just like chat live. Like we have shared Slack channel, which is each of our customers for now. And I think we'll keep that for a long time. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, like basically we are still in the test phase because we know that the thing has not been deployed to the whole team, but they are willing to pay for, usually like the double of active users at the moment. Like they know they are starting to release it to the whole company. And so we keep kind of like helping them deploy more use cases and so on. Yeah. So we have like this, paid trial phase that happens like organically for, 2 months, 3 months before they set to yearly.
Did you kind of reach a point now where it's like, hey, this is the process, and you tell the customer proactively like, hey, listen, if you want to buy this thing, those are the steps. It's going to take 2 to 3 weeks. There's going to be, something paid on top. You're going to focus on those areas. How much do you, I want to say, guide that phase, right? Because it's very easy, and I've seen this mistake being made many times in, traditional SaaS as well. So like, sure, let's just plug in and let's do a trial. And then you have like a meh start and a mediocre outcome. But here it's just simply necessary, right? So did you get to the point of being extremely structured around this and basically kind of asking the customer kind of what are the things we need to prove to you for you to buy, right? Kind of it's a very, very hardcore sales question to ask. But walk me a little bit through this kind of how deep into that structure did you go already?
I think you say it super well. It's exactly what we need to do. For now, like we are still at a phase where we are learning. So yes, we are very directive for each new customers, but I can't tell you that we don't change it every time. Like we basically adapt and learn. But yeah, like the boundaries like become clearer and clearer. Like we have like this thing about defining the use case, exactly what you said, like what do we need to prove you for you to buy? And the answer varies so much. Like some people have very, very clear use case and they want to nail this. Some people will be like much more, like some people, for instance, like a customer that we had like recently, like told me, if you manage to kind of like have like 3 questions answered on their own, like without access to the team in a week, that's enough for me to pay for 50 users. And, it's interesting. It's basically people that really see the value of the time actually of their employee, which are all, very well paid folks. So yeah, like asking this question, like whatever is the answer, is like one of the starting point, defining the use case, and then like setting a timeline for the 2-3 weeks of the trial.
The last piece I'm missing is just how do you then go from having run that let's say successful proof of concept, what even that means, to okay, let's now move over to contract and get you on as a full-on customer. Because I have lots of questions there where it's like, well, do they already know? Is there already a pre-negotiated deal? Is there transparency in price? Or do you kind of take that at the end? And when do you start it? I think that's also pretty good to get a feel for.
Yeah, I think this is where like you can see also the DNA of Slite, which is like a self-serve company. So we are also learning more and more like, the sales-led motion. But yes, to answer your question, the price is very transparent since the beginning. It's kind of the same when you hire. I don't know if you do that, but I like to be very upfront on, the first interview, almost like the salary will be X. Are you good with that? Just to, get off the way if like the expectations are completely misaligned. And to not have like unnecessary negotiation down the line, especially when we spend so much time with them. But then what happens usually is that we never onboard, like, at least so far, the entirety of the organization. And I think that speaks for us not being necessarily like a ultra sales driven organization. I think like that's my goal at the end of the year, is to have like, signing contract of like whatever, like 1,000 people up front, and have like, like a continuous customer success program where we help them deploy rather than expand like progressively. But for now, like, like we basically sign like half of the organization and then, of 200, 500 people, and then it grows naturally. I mean, at least that's the goal for this year. But yeah, like it also makes sense, right? Like, and we don't really I'm not over focusing on this. Like the focus is really like building the right tool so that this motion can happen like 10 times faster in 6 months.
Yeah. That's it. Awesome. But it's super interesting, I think, to just hear from someone with feet on the ground, how that's being run. I think there's so much happening in this space right now. It's kind of hard to keep up. The other day, Tony and I were talking about the application layer was dead. All of a sudden, DeepSeek arrives, and then everything just changes, right? But at the end of the day, you still need to bring it in the hands of users. And I think this was super interesting. And I hope the listeners out there who are going towards AI picked up a few things that's going to help them succeed better with that, bringing that offering to market.
Yeah, I think things I picked up, just to maybe kind of, sum it up from my perspective. I think there's a different buying behavior happening right now. And I think it's driven by, hey, someone in the company tells you to kind of investigate this AI thing. But I also think it's driven by some fear, uncertainty, doubt around, okay, this works really well in your demo. Is it going to work with my data? I think there's some stuff around that. And really nailing that is really about, okay, prove it to me that it works on my data, which is kind of the approach from them. I think what you then also, in addition to that, picked up from a selling motion is, well, really what we need to achieve is a change of habit on the other side. So, while the buyer thinks, oh, we just need to prove that I put in the, a prompt and it gives me the right answer. Really what you as a seller need to prove is like, is that really changing the habit of work for people? Because otherwise you won't be able to unlock the ROI calculation that you need in order to close this deal with C-level, basically, right? So there are a couple of different things here that are happening at the same time, which I think is super confusing for everyone out there. That's why everyone's like, this is that, this is that, this is that.
Yeah.
But I think because so many changes are happening at the same time, we also wanted to have Chris here as kind of a founder, CEO that sees some of these, tectonic plates shifting and kind of giving the perspective here. And I think if you're a VP marketing, if you're VP sales, if you're revenue operations, and kind of listening to this, it's really being aware of those different trends that are, overlapping at the same time. And if you don't see the differences in those trends, then kind of everything is being muddled. But I think after this chat here, I think even myself, I feel a bit more clearer why some of that stuff is just different than it was with SaaS. And if there's anything that I'm thinking, kind of adding some of my own perspective on this, I think we are in a technological shift, and there's lots of uncertainty because of that. I think some of that pain and changing and friction in this process, I think it will go away over the years. Both because people's experiences change. They maybe have bought one or two AI products previously. Maybe there's some more infrastructure plays that you just mentioned, Chris, in terms of like, hey, maybe there's this one data provider that you plug in and get the data from there, and then, okay, easy peasy. There might be a couple of things happening that make this smoother, but we're not there yet. So in order to kind of sell your AI stuff now, I think you need to just be aware and kind of navigate this in the right way. I hope I kind of summed it up in a proper way here, Chris. But thank you so much for having you here. Basically, kind of spending time with us. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah,
and
awesome.
Yeah, good luck with your new product launch. Sounds really exciting.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Tony. Thanks so much, Mikkel. It was great.
Wonderful. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.